Uh, Hi, Vinnie. Good to have you here on the call. It's a pleasure, sharing with you today our strategy and innovation path forward in the retail industry, what we see in SAP and where we're heading. My name is Achim Schneider. I'm leading the Industry Business Unit Retail, and with that, I'm responsible for the global go-to-market on all retail solutions, capabilities we already have in our portfolio, or we're going to have in the portfolio in the future. And the same are also taking care of all these enablements across the world and customer support while moving forward in the retail space. So where I want to start with today is very briefly talking about the key challenges we see here in the market, because for us in retail, when we move forward in our strategy, it's very important that we consider these challenges. And I think for every retailer, these topics are very clear. I think we don't need to go into the details here, but just to rephrase it, the consumer demand new level of value. So what is it what want consumers to look at? How important is the brand for a consumer? Is it about the trust building to the retailer? How are the consumers in today's world, where they have all the information simply available, as we like to say, on the fingertip, are able to also influence with that retailers. So retailers need to consider all that, and so being able finally to address their business to consumers. And during the COVID time, we did two reports. One was in 2020 and the other one beginning of this year. And one of the questions in there was, how loyal are consumers to a brand or retailer? And what we figured is that the consumers, this was in 2020, they said, okay, we are willing to move to another brand. And I think it's about 30% were saying, okay, I even stay with the new brand. I'm not going back to the other retailer. In 2021, we asked the same question again, and we figured, well, even a much higher number is willing to go to the new brand and not going back to the retailer. So that means for the retailer, they have to rethink their businesses. They have to rethink how to approach consumers and keep the consumers in their business.
We've seen in the US, the last mile delivery firms like the Instacarts, they're becoming the face of the consumers. So there's a risk that we don't care if it comes from this grocery chain or that grocery chain, so long as I get what I want, right? So that's another threat.
Exactly, and that's also what we see with these disruptive market entrants. Everything is digital, and I can easily order everything on Amazon if I want to, even fresh goods. In the US it works, in Europe not that good, but at least the idea is given. And for retailers, it means very clearly, okay, what does it mean? Do I have to be necessarily in the e-commerce? Or is it more about rethinking again, how can I attract my business to the end consumer? And it's also the mix of both. Sustainability, a very, very important topic. I think we discussed it briefly in the other call. Sustainability in retail, we see it as a very, very important topic. It's not just the supply chain, where you have these typical checkpoints and controls along the supply chain, how a product is being produced, or if it is a child work behind, or lots of other things. In retail, there are lots of aspects also to consider into that. For example, are these products I'm selling in my store maybe from home farmers? Or how can I reduce waste in my store with technology? And lots of other things which are concerning the pure retail topic. And I think that's important retailers consider too. And mentioned already at the beginning, purpose-driven retail. So it's important that end consumers are able to build up a trusted relation to the retailer, or the retailer to the end consumer, because I'd like to go to my preferred brand, which is now for grocery Edeka in Germany. But if I figure that the fresh goods are not fresh enough anymore, and next door Aldi is much better in that, I might change, and I lose trust because they are not doing or selling that what they promised to me. So it's important that retailers look at that too. So, and this leads us to we call it 5 priorities we see in retail, and these are for us really key for our developments, what we are doing. And I'd like to start with the customer centricity. So, and here I also want to cover some of our solution capabilities, so you know what is it what we're going to provide and offer here to the market. Customer centricity has always been one of the key topics over the last 20 years. I remember 25 years back when I started, it was still everything was brand driven, and then around 2000 it started, you know, customer. How can I get the end consumer into my game? And we figured, okay, there's a new kind of motion in retail. But in the meanwhile, it's the very usual thing to consider the customer in the center of my retail business. So for us, it's very important. And that's also how we want to help retailers moving on. You see on the left side, there are three, call it levels. One is the best practice. We call the next one next practice. And we call on the bottom, you find the vertical edge. So we say retailers need to be enabled to move from today's best practice world into a so-called vertical edge. With maybe the vertical edge is not the right wording, but it's the idea, what are the levels I can bring a retailer to while a retailer is in a transformational process. So when we talk about customer centricity, we think it's very much also about planning. I need to know about my customer. I need to understand the behavior of the customer. And with all those information I'm going to collect, I need to be able to optimize already in the planning. I'm not talking about the loyalty part, it's coming later. Here I'm talking about the planning area. So if I'm able to plan rightly with the right data, if I have the right strategies being considered in my planning, coming from the finance, going through the merchandise, down to the replenishment, the assortment, the promotion, and in fashion, the allocation planning. If I have all these pieces coming together on one data set, I'm able to optimize also my planning. I remember years back, I was working very closely together with Chico's, I mean, one of your neighbor retailers in Florida. And we were talking about planning. And they had one key topic. They were saying, we need to do a better markdown during the season. And I asked the question, so why are you not considering this markdown idea in your plannings already? So get maybe an even better price at the end of the season, instead of simply saying, I do a 3-step markdown of my products, you know, end of the season. And so they brought these planning ideas back, these KPIs into the planning, into the strategies of the plannings, and they were able to have a much better lean assortment at the end of the day, and so less markdowns in the business. I mean, finally, an easy way to improve your revenue at the end of the day. What's important for us is when we talk replenishment is, as you know, very much for hard goods and grocery. So fast turning products, you need to replenish on the day or twice a day, you to replenish probably once a week. So depending on the product mix you have different cycles of replenishment. And for us, it's important that we not just do replenishment based on my sales data. I also need to consider the inventory on hand in the store. I need to understand what is in my DC. I should even know what is in my supply chain, so that finally your replenishment is being optimized at the end and you're not running overstock or understock. And if you combine it with allocation, as it is in fashion, you do the first rounds probably allocation, which means push. You plan your allocation, which is a push process, moving products to the store, and maybe to the end of the season, you bring it in an automized replenishment process so that you can deliver it from the warehouse directly into stores, or if needed, you also can transfer it back to the warehouse. So these are the things we're considering around planning when we talk about how can I optimize my customer view or consider my customer view in my business processes right from the beginning.
Are you going to cover 2 or 3 things, if you get a chance, touch on them? One would be, what are you doing about reverse logistics? Because that's become a big issue in retail, right? Second is, what are you doing about automated warehouses? Because, you know, obviously, automated fulfillment centers and warehouses.
Mm-hmm.
And then in your case, what are you doing about apparel footwear? That's been kind of a unique vertical for you, right? Does that still come under you, or is that a separate market? If you, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but if
No,
you
that's
could
fine.
just cover those as you go along.
Yeah. So that's a perfect question. So in retail, we are not just saying it's pure retail, so hard goods and grocery. It's also the verticals. So the seasonal retailers, or these Adidas and Nikes in the world, are also considered under the retail umbrella. Obviously, there's an overlap with CP from the production side, but I mean, as you know, all these huge fashionists in the world, they are focusing more and more on the retail businesses, sourcing out the production, but focusing on the retail, because finally with the direct to the end consumer relation, there's the money they can make at the end of the day. So that's definitely one of the big moves. And so we decided, and we did this already 20 years back, that everything what we are going to enhance and improve in our solutions should consider the different segments in the retail business. So it should be for grocery, fresh goods. It should be for do-it-yourself, which also has connection points to seasonal. It should be considered for hard goods, but also for typical fashion and seasonal retailers. So in the planning, for example, when I talk about assortment planning, this is very much about fashion planning for the seasons. So it's able to cover these, long lead time plannings you need to have before you purchase it. It's able to consider these in-season planning with the allocation planning. It considers also the promotion planning when it comes combined with the markdown, so that you have better prices at the end of the season. So these are the pieces we also already consider here in our area of planning. And you will see that also in the other areas. When we talk about the core merchandising, we have the capabilities to run end-to-end from production through wholesale, through retail, with one solution set, which is our core merchandising, our S/4HANA merchandise management. And this is able to cover seasonal or non-seasonal products, the mix of both, because there's no pure retailer doing only the one thing. You usually have always a mix of products in retail. And so you need to be able to consider that and cover that. So that's for us very important. When we talk about returns or reverse logistics, I have another priority. It's called about digital supply chain. If you don't mind, I would cover it briefly on that side.
Yep.
When it comes to the segment of one, so that's for me the real understanding of the end consumer. So who is the customer? What is here the context in my relation? What is his level of loyalty? All these things have to be considered, but the key thing I'm as a retailer looking for is, am I able to understand the single customer in my retail business to run a real personalization? And loyalty is only one thing, because I'm able to collect data on the POS with a loyalty card. But does this make a customer a real personalized customer? Not really, because there are lots of other aspects to be considered. So how is a customer behaving in the internet on the social media side around a product? I'd like to collect these data. I want to combine the data with the shopping behavior of a customer in a store and the shopping behavior of the customer in the e-commerce side. I'd like also to consider or understand what is the customer himself. Or you go to Burberry's. Burberry started already on that many years back, when they said, I want to have a 360-degree view of my customer. So once a customer enters the store, the staff knows, okay, customer A is coming, and I know exactly what that customer bought last time, and I know what the customer put back to the shelf last time, and I also potentially have an idea what is the preference for his shopping day today. So is it the handbag, or is it maybe the coat? And how can I serve now the customer in the right way? That's exactly what retail is looking at. But for me as the end consumer, if I look at it from the other angle, I don't care if I go to a fashion retailer or to a grocery retailer. Finally, I want to be served in a personalized way. That's the ultimate experience you're looking for as an end consumer. And for the retailer, it means, okay, let's do that. What is it, what I need to do? I need to understand the customer. I need to be able to really personalize. I don't want to bombard him with emails making promotions. I want to send in exactly his personal promotion for maybe a very specific set of products. And that's something where we also built our solutions around. So there's one solution which is called our Customer Activity Repository. I'm not sure if you heard about that. So in our retail portfolio, we said core merchandising end-to-end is a given. That's in the back end, that's running, it's taking care of all these standard processes. But I need to be able to collect data. I mean, we were now talking about data. And that data collection, we said, should come together under the so-called Customer Activity Repository, which actually is a repository where you collect all T-log data, regardless if it is in a store or if it is a sales order from the e-commerce. So every channel where you do it in interaction or transaction with the end consumer, you collect the data. You also know, if the possibility is given, who is the customer who did the transaction. I also know the basket, I know the products, I know the price. So you have all the essential information, and you can enrich these information with social media data and other data. This is coming together under the repository. And the idea for us is here that, not the idea, but our capability is providing that we also have now the data in that repository, and we are able to run a so-called unified forecast or demand forecast. Remember the planning solutions I showed you before? For that, you potentially want to run forecasts to have a much better planning view. And this forecast should happen on one data. I don't want to have a forecast for replenishment or for allocation or for pricing. I want to have one forecast, and that forecast is coming exactly out of this Customer Activity Repository. And all these solutions for planning are sitting on top of that. So that's actually, for a retailer, a perfect fit working on one data. And it's linked obviously automatically into the S4 merchandising world. But for us, and that's the way how we help retailers. So you can say nearly every deal we did in the last 10 years with retailers had also Customer Activity Repository within the offering, because that's the essential part. And we started the implementation usually in saying, first, collect the data. Second, what is the first thing you want to do? Oh, inventory. The inventory visibility is key. So make this happen. I mean, you ask for fashion. Now, if you look into fashion, do you think the Adidas store doesn't know how much of inventory is on the next store around the corner, which is a block for e-commerce? Probably not, because these are separate inventories. So how to bring these together? And that was exactly our purpose. Build it on one data, on one HANA platform, and make it happen there. So that was one of our key things. And with that, we are also able to exactly run these kind of personalization.